Namaskar to all of you, and thank you for coming here on a Sunday. This is a series on Sri Aurobindo's book, Synthesis of Yoga, and some of our previous talks, it has been centered around yoga of divine works or karma yoga. This was one part of this book, Synthesis of Yoga. And with this talk, we begin the next part in this book, which is called as the Yoga of Integral Knowledge, or in simple terms, as we usually know it, is Gyan Yoga. Gyan Yoga, if we look at it from its face value, what it means to us, if we explore the meaning of Gyan Yoga, it is combination of words Gyan, which means knowledge, and Yoga, which means union. So it seems like a process of seeking union with the divine through Gyan or knowledge. And then the next question is that what kind of knowledge is it that is referred to in Gyan Yoga? Is it something that we commonly read or study in schools and colleges? Or obviously it refers to something deeper, which is the timeless wisdom of life. That wisdom which was the same 10,000 years back and would continue to remain the same in the future. So maybe Gyan Yoga is a process of union with the divine through this timeless wisdom. And then the next question is, where do we find this timeless wisdom? Do we read books? Do we read Shastras? Do we read Bible, Quran, Srimad Bhagavad Gita? Or for that matter, is Synthesis of Yoga or Sri Aurobindo and Mother's works a source of Gyan Yoga? Or there is something again deeper to it? So if we look at it or explore it further, Gyan Yoga refers to a process of using one's intellect or one's power of discrimination, or as the Upanishads and Vedas have put it, as the power of neti neti, or a power of rejection of who I am not, to explore deeper into discovering one's true self. So more than a book, it is using the power of mind and intellect, using the mind and intellect as a window to discover what really does it mean to experience being one's own true self, or that self which is beyond this universe, or the supreme self. So that is one of the deeper meanings to what is Gyan Yoga. And when we look at it that way, some other common questions that arise for any sadhak is, then what is the place of action in this seeking? Is Gyan Yoga by itself a complete process where through the mind we are seeking the true divine self? It's a process of neti neti. Then is there a role of action in it? And is there a role of love and bhakti in the same process? And another adjunct question that often comes with Gyan Yoga is, what after one discovers the supreme absolute divine, what is the ultimate outcome that one seeks out of Gyan Yoga? Is it an absolute liberation, moksha, or is it something more than that? So these are some common questions that all of us have when we explore the realms of yoga of knowledge or Jnana Yoga. And to answer these questions, Sri Aurobindo in this chapter first dwells into what does Jnana Yoga process mean in its traditional form, or what has been perceived of its traditional form, and how Sri Aurobindo and Mother has perceived it in terms of integral yoga. So let's first look at it from the perspective of the traditional Jnana Yoga, where it is a process of answering the question, who am I? Who am I truly? Am I this body? And through the power of discrimination, which we normally use to, it's a power of our intellect and mind through which we decide normally what is good and bad, what is right and wrong. We discriminate, we discern, we differentiate based on this power. So one can use that power here also to answer the question, who am I? Am I this body? If I am this body, then is that it? When I die off, is it the end of me? Maybe not. There is something deeper in me which still survives beyond death. Am I this mind, these thoughts and emotions? If it is so, when I sit down in meditation and there is a certain degree of silence that comes in, the thoughts are quietened, the emotions are quietened, there may be a perception of something still which is awake and aware. So maybe I'm not even this mind and these emotions. When I'm sleeping, this body is at absolute peace, the mind is at absolute peace. Yet when I wake up, there is something which is still aware of how was the sleep. So there is an element of awareness or something which is beyond this mind, this body. So here we are using the power of discrimination or discernment in order to get deeper into identifying who am I as a true self. And this process then goes one step beyond by the process of Dhyana, Dharan and Samadhi, where one uses the power of concentration to bring in that focus and that calmness in the being and focus oneself at any one aspect of the divine, and gradually moving beyond this body-mind complex and moving beyond the forms of this universe and meeting the divine in its absolute, transcendent, formless, absolute, supreme form of the divine, which is a kind of an undescribable experience. Yet, it is a beautiful, peaceful, liberating experience for any individual. And that is proposed as the ultimate outcome of Jnana Yoga, to merge into this quiet, supreme space which is beyond any illusions. And since this is the ultimate outcome that a pure Jnana Yoga seeks, then naturally action has a very limited role in the process of Jnana Yoga. The typical narrative, as Monica ji quoting Kabir Das Doha said, that this body is like a kagaz ki nao, and it gets blown away in the rivers of water and rivers of emotions. So the moment the individual from this quietness of the Supreme comes down again, he's met with these intense waves of emotions and he gets blown away in these emotions. So the ultimate outcome becomes very difficult to manifest in this worldly life. And hence, in the process of Gyan Yoga, largely it involves quietening of these faculties of human system, our heart, our emotions, our senses, and even the actions are largely limited to what is absolutely necessary for the person. Or the actions are centered largely around purification of the body and mind, so that when it sits in meditation to seek the divine, when it seeks Gyan Yoga, the body is purified enough to be able to perceive that. And that is how the Eightfold Path of Buddhism or Jainism or a lot of different other systems or code of conduct has been built around in religions and various spiritual sects, in order to maintain that purity of action, so that ultimately when one sits for Gyan Yoga, one can retire into that absolute quietude. To look at it with an example, if we decide to climb a mountain and reaching the summit of the mountain is the ultimate outcome that we seek, then sure, the action will have its value until the point we are climbing up the mountain. But the moment we reach the summit, then one would wonder, what is the role of action in this whole process? And to this, Sri Aurobindo remarks on the process of Jnana Yoga, that in the end, any severe and pure Jnana Yoga, all works must be abundant for an entire quiescence. Action may prepare salvation, it cannot give it. Any continued adherence to action is incompatible with highest progress. And even devotion, love, worships are disciplines for the unripe soul, are at best the methods of the ignorance. So this is how a pure and extreme Jnana Yoga looks at devotion, worship, action. It is something which we generally do not see these days. Wherever we go, spirituality is not necessarily such an extreme Jnana Yoga, but it is good to reflect on it, that how a purely Jnana Yogi would view bhakti as, or action as. But at the same time, it's important to respect and acknowledge the beauty of this seeking of the supreme divine, because in our day-to-day life, when we talk about there is a divine beyond this universe, it is something very difficult for all of us to imagine, experience, with all the densities and impurities in the senses. It is very difficult to fathom this experience. So what Jnana Yoga does to us is to at least help us de-identify and help us ignite that aspiration to look beyond this and experience this supreme infinite divine. But at the same time, one has to question, is that all what yoga is about, or is that all that Jnana Yoga is about, or there is something more to it? That is the question. And so to answer this question, what more is there to Jnana Yoga, one can look at how human beings came to this perception of Gyan Yoga, that Gyan Yoga is just about seeking that silence and liberation and moksha. And to delve deeper into it, if we look at the human system and the various faculties that we have our senses, this body, this vital pranic energy, the emotions of the heart, the mind, and the evolved form of the mind, which is the intellect or the power of discernment. And in all these faculties, what is that faculty which seems to be closest to the divine? Or what is that faculty which has the most capacity to experience the divine? And one of the common answers that emerges is that faculty may be the intellect, because that is one faculty which differentiates a human being and an animal. It is that which we have developed as human beings, where we can say, I don't want to look anymore outwards, I want to look inwards. What is my true self? Who am I? All these questions one is able to ask and find answers to through this intellect. So this intellect has to be that power which is more evolved in us. Man is a mental being, so this is that power through which one can actually arrive at the divine. Another reason through which one can justify that thought or mind is the closest to the divine is by the fact that it is that part of us which still finds its contentment and peace and silence. If we talk about our heart, the heart loves, the heart likes to go out and relate to others. It likes action, it likes sharing, whether it is outwards or inwards. The heart likes to be in movement. Same is true for our vital, which wants to explore. It seeks delight. It seeks pleasure. So the vital also finds its contentment in a kind of a movement or action. But thought has that capacity of finding contentment in peace. Although it's a bit of a contradiction in today's day and age, when a person wants to go off to sleep, the heart wants to rest, the body wants to rest, but it is the mind which goes on thinking. But still, if we look at it from a fulfillment or contentment perspective, that it is thought which can still find its contentment in quietude, because then it can reflect some of the divine energy and the divine knowledge into it and a divine oneness into it. So it can find its contentment through this quietude which an absolute divine experience brings. And then no wonder that this thought mind and this intellect claims to be the leader of our spiritual journey. It claims to be the innermost door to the temple of divine in human system. And then it can impose itself upon the whole human system that since I am the leader, then one has to listen to me and quieten the hearts seeking after love and vitals seeking after delight. Those need to be quietened, and all one needs to seek is the satisfaction of that absolute supreme divine. But here Sri Aurobindo points out to us that in reality, thought is only a scout and a pioneer. It can guide, but not command or effectuate. The leader of the journey, the captain of the march, the first and the most ancient priest of our sacrifice is the will. So intellect can be a scout, like a child sent out by someone to find what is the way to the divine. It can be a pioneer. It can be the first part of us which gets exposed to the divine light. But it cannot be the leader or the commander of the yoga. The captain of the march is the deep inmost will within us. And what is that deep inmost will which is the captain of the march? It is not what we usually refer to as the will, that I want to do this, I want to find the divine, or it is not our mental preference. It is the deepest, inmost space within us. To understand it with an example of medical science has made a lot of progress over the past 100 years. And every day the knowledge goes on expanding, the intellectual understanding of human system goes on expanding every day. Yet doctors are still in our country having the lowest life expectancy. Doctors live the least. If in front of a person who smokes, you put up all the information about why smoking is bad, it doesn't help him stop smoking. Because even though these things are feeding the intellect is not the leader of our system. And the common answer that you hear is, जब अंदर से आवाज आएगी, then कुछ होगा, अभी कुछ नहीं हो सकता है. So that अंदर की आवाज is the inmost will, which Sri Aurobindo is referring to. So even on the spiritual journey, it is that inmost will which is the captain of march. And Sri Aurobindo describes this inmost will. It is that inmost, dominant and often wielded conscious force of our being. So it is the inmost and it is that dominant part of us, but it is wielded. We are most often not aware of it. It is hidden from us. So it is the inmost, dominant and often wielded conscious force of our being and of all beings. It is the tapas, shakti, shraddha. It is the faith. And this faith and will, they are very deeply connected to each other. And it is that tapas, shakti, shraddha that sovereignly determines our orientation, and of which the intellect and the heart are more or less blind and automatic servants and instruments. So to this Shakti or faith or will, both our intellect and both our heart are blind instruments. They are not even aware that the orientation of intellect and heart is actually being determined inside by this deep inmost will. And a lot of Sri Aurobindo and Mother's literature is there to emphasize this part, that the divine is not just in its silent, quiet form. The divine also has its dynamic aspect, the Shakti, the divine will. And the eventual process of yoga is discovering the union between the two and surrendering to this dynamic aspect of the divine. And this dynamic divine will is the one which is equally present in all of us, be it any animal, any human being, any animate or inanimate object. It is equally present within all beings. And then he writes that to know that will in ourselves and in the universe and follow it to its divine finalities. So to know that will within us and in the universe and follow it to its divine finalities, to follow its purpose, whatever these may be, must surely be the highest way and truest culmination for knowledge, as for works, for the seeker in life, for the seeker in yoga. So the true meaning of yoga or gyan yoga or yoga of integral knowledge, Sri Aurobindo refers to it, to know this will or search for this element or the captain of the march, is the true meaning of gyan yoga. And unlike the process of traditional gyan yoga, which eliminates the role of the vital emotions, the heart, the senses and the body in yoga, or limits that role, in this yoga of integral knowledge, there is first an acknowledgement of this element within us, a gratitude for its presence, for its sacrifice, and an acknowledgement of the all-inclusiveness of this inner will. This inner will is not just seeking the satisfaction of the intellect. For this inner will, the heart is equally important. In fact, what heart can accomplish, just a pure dry intellect may not. Because in medical science also we talk about how the magnetic field of heart is much larger and vaster than the mind or the head and the brain. So actually for this inmost will, the heart is very important. And so is the vital and our pranic energy and the body. So it is an all-inclusive space, yet neti or elimination is important even in yoga of integral knowledge. But what does elimination mean in yoga of integral knowledge? In Gyan Yoga, there is a kind of an elimination. I am not this body, I am not this mind, I am not these senses. But what is the elimination then in yoga of integral knowledge? All that is eliminated is the unconsciousness in our being, the ignorance in our being, and the falsity and the outcomes of that ignorance. The body and vital with its mechanical day-to-day habits are not rejected. The body and vital remains the same. But what is eliminated is the mechanical nature. If we do one thing today, the next day morning also we feel like doing the same thing. We feel like eating at the same time. So what is to be eliminated is this feeling that I am this body and I am this habits. That needs to be eliminated, and the action needs to move out of that into a conscious action at every moment. The senses don't need to be eliminated, but their dual seeking of running after pleasure and aversion from pain is what needs to be eliminated, which has to make room for seeking after the divine delight in the senses, the bliss, whether it is in pleasure and whether it is pain. The heart doesn't need to be eliminated, yet it needs to be accepted. And what needs to be eliminated is its dual nature of emotions, or more so the attachments in our love. The love remains, but the attachments and expectations that come along with that needs to be eliminated so that it can open up to a deeper heart within us, which has the capacity to experience universal unconditional love. So this process also involves neti. Rejection is an important part of yoga, But one has to be clear that what one rejects in the path of yoga. And when we eliminate this unconsciousness, ignorance progressively in our system, it gradually becomes into a process of integral fulfillment, not just the fulfillment of the mind, but fulfillment of our whole being. It becomes into not just an exclusive concentration on the divine, but an all-receiving concentration where every part of us receives the divine. So now, having looked at what really is the outcome that Gyan Yoga, the true Gyan Yoga, seeks, to know that inmost will within us and around us, and it seeks an all-receiving concentration, and the outcome is an integral self-fulfillment. The next question in front of us is that how does it relate to that supreme divine which the traditional Gyan Yoga refers to, that form of the divine which is beyond this universe, which is also a truth. How does that supreme divine relate to this individual, relate to this inmost will, and relate to this universe? Is the next question in front of us. And if we look at it, how this supreme transcendent divine relate to our individual self, then this supreme divine maybe represents our own highest possibility, our own highest self, and the highest self of all beings. Human system or the individual soul is not like a black and white, that right now I am my lower self and tomorrow I am my higher self and suddenly I've climbed up to being the supreme divine. It is a continuum, it is like a ladder of transcendence. Buddhism has classified it into 10 stages of the self. Various other systems have classified it in 5 stages. But largely, the same individual, all of us here sitting, have the capacity to act out of our lowest self and also the capacity of this highest supreme self. We very often in our clinics come across some of the lower possibilities of human beings. Very often patients come and sit and say, Dr. Sahab, I am perfect, I am perfectly fine, everything is good with me. बस ये छोटी सी चीज़ है, इसको आप ठीक कर दो, otherwise I am perfect. And if the patient repeats this line 4-5 times, मैं बिल्कुल ठीक हूँ, I am perfect. Then the next question we ask is, how much do you drink every day? And the patient says, Dr. Sahab, I don't drink too much, it's only half a bottle, but you see I'm full of energy through the day, there's nothing wrong with me, I'm perfectly fine. So we see this lower self which builds up layers and layers of defenses, layers and layers of aham around it. And then we also see patients who have risen above this lower self, and there is receptivity. There is a willingness to acknowledge that there are things which need to be worked upon. They seek answers in their life. And of course, then there are great souls who have touched the divine, the supreme, and carry that light within them. So there are all these possibilities of lowest self within all of us, and also this highest possibility of touching that supreme divine self. But the traditional Gyan Yoga focuses on taking a leap of the mind to this supreme highest self, ignoring on the way what Sri Aurobindo refers to as kingdoms of light. Because there are stages in between this lower self and higher self. And what happens with that, because it uses mind as a tool, the mind cannot carry the light of this absolute supreme divine, or it cannot possess this supreme divine. All it can maximum do is reflect some of the light of the Satchidananda or the supreme divine into it and carry it back down into this body. But since the experience coming back here is again fragmentary, then it loses very quickly that light that it has carried along with it. So hence the importance of a gradual bit by bit progress and not just a blind leap into the supreme transcendent divine, which Sri Aurobindo describes as the mind can only be aware of the self in a mentalized spiritual thinness. It's still a mental space. What if the mind leaps into it? It's only a mentalized spiritual thinness, only of the mind reflected Satchidananda. What is reflected from the Satchidananda into the mind. The highest truth, the integral self-knowledge or that inmost will we are referring to, is not to be gained by this self-blinded leap into the absolute, but by a patient transit beyond the mind into the truth consciousness, where the infinite can be known, felt, seen, experienced in all the fullness of its unending riches. So here Sri Aurobindo sheds light on another aspect of Jnana Yoga, that the integral self-fulfillment of Jnana Yoga and seeking after that inmost will cannot entirely happen through the mind. One has to patiently open up to the supramental or the supermind or various layers of the Vijnanamaya Kosha beyond the mind. And it is something which seems quite distant to all of us in an experience, but it is important to believe. It is important to again go back to that faith and inmost will that it is a future possibility of all of us. And at the same time, he emphasizes the word patient transit, taking that one little step towards opening up to what is beyond this mind, anchoring oneself there, mastering that space, then taking one little step further and believing and having faith, because that is the space from which the experience of the supreme one divine can also be there, and at the same time there can be a liberated action in this world in the here and now. So it is a patient transit from this mind to further layers of the mind. And here Sri Aurobindo guards or warns the sadhak at the same time of this seeking after the supermind, because when we hear the word supermind in Sri Aurobindo's works, there is also that element in us which perceives supermind as some superpower. As in the West, a lot of courses are centered around Kundalini awakening and the third eye opening. Same way, supermind is also that superpower that one can seek. But here also Sri Aurobindo emphasizes the sole purpose of seeking the supermind. Sole purpose is an integral union with the divine and with this divine will. If there is any other purpose mixed in it, or if there is not a strong foundation of equanimity, equality in our being, then either this process of seeking the supermind will not go too far, or if it does go too far, then like in the case of Ravana, it may end with a disaster. So it is important to lay a strong foundation and be clear about the purpose of seeking the supermind, and make it a process of faith and patience, and a patient transit layer by layer, anchoring oneself, taking little steps at a time. So this is how Sri Aurobindo talks about how the Supreme relates to the individual as the highest self of the individual. The next question is, how does this Supreme relate to this universe which is all around us? And even this experience, if it happens from our own paradigm or the sensory viewpoint, we see this universe as physical matter, at best energy or space. But again, turning inwards into the inner senses from an intuitive perception, this universe represents matter, energy, and mind. A universal matter, a universal energy, and it has a universal mind of its own. Even the quantum physics arrives at some of these common conclusions. And how this universal matter, energy, and mind relate to the Supreme is that the Supreme is not only the spiritual material or the conscious substance of this matter, energy, and mind. When we say it is the spiritual material, then we refer to the fact that whether it is matter or its energy or its mind, they are very different, subtler or denser frequencies of the same energy. The matter being a very dense frequency, and energy being lighter, and mind being even a subtler frequency. But all three of them are made out of the same substance, which is consciousness. So the Supreme is not only the conscious substance or spiritual material of this universe, but it is also the source, the creator, and also the support, and also the possessor of this universe. So it is the spiritual substance, the originator, the creator, the supporter, and the possessor of this universe. And if we look at both the relation of the Supreme with this individual soul and the Supreme with this universe, the individual soul is like an emanation of that Supreme Self, and this universe is created by this Supreme, and it possesses it and it supports it. And this covering of body, mind around this individual soul is an expression of this universe. Now this is very challenging for our mind to hold as an imagination. It's one of those things, some of the Sri Aurobindo's texts we say wo sar ke upar se chala jata hai, because that's what we need that faculty beyond mind to be open in order to perceive it because it kind of carries opposites in it, and our mind cannot put together those opposites, but it can be felt to a degree in our physical, in our heart. So this individual soul is an emanation of this Supreme, and this universe is made out of the spiritual substance of Supreme, and it is supported and possessed by the Supreme, and our physical, vital and mental covering is an expression of this universe. It's a moment of gratitude how Sri Aurobindo, speaking and writing out of a space which is beyond mind, helps us break down our mental constructs and help us see with some clarity what all these things represent. But here again, the traditional Gyan Yoga and the importance of the Supreme Absolute comes in, because having heard all of this, we will all have our own perceptions, and we will all construct, using our own minds, different perceptions of the truth. And that is what the Gyan Yoga's reservation has always been, because we all ultimately cage ourselves in our own definition of what is the Supreme and what is this universe and what is this individual soul, and start living in it. And the rescue remedy of Gyan Yoga is to reject all of this and seek the Supreme, which is beyond these illusions. But here, Sri Aurobindo, that is the reason he emphasizes the importance of opening up layer by layer with a patient transit towards this supermind, which can reconcile these opposites for us, which goes beyond this measuring intellect and creates a space where there is that experience of truth and liberation and peace, yet there can be action in the here and now. And Sri Aurobindo ends this chapter with the lines, "The liberated knower who lives in the space of supermind lives and acts in the world, not less than the bound soul and the ignorant mind." So the liberated knower lives and acts in this world in no way less than how we act in our daily life, but more, doing all actions only with a true knowledge and a greater conscient power. So it acts the same way, and in fact more, but with a true knowledge and a great conscient power. And by so doing, he does not forfeit the supreme unity nor fall from the supreme consciousness. So by doing these actions, it does not fall or lose that unity with the supreme, nor does it fall from the supreme consciousness and the highest knowledge. For the supreme, however hidden now to us, is here in the world, no less than he could be in the most utter ineffable self-extinction. So that supreme is equally present in this world as it is beyond this world. So just to summarize some of the insights and actionables for today for us is one is to even explore the process of Jnana Yoga and how this Jnana Yoga is something which can help us move out of our experience of dense emotions into that quiet supreme self. It in itself is a beautiful experience. So it evokes an aspiration of experiencing the supreme divine. The second insight and actionable from this chapter for us is to acknowledge and be grateful to to the actual captain of our march towards the divine, that is our inmost will, and to bring it forward, to learn to be receptive to it. There are various different mediums and methods through which one can gradually open up to this inmost will, the simplest being self-acceptance and love. Through simple acceptance of who we are in the present moment and just loving ourselves the way we are in the present moment unconditionally, opens us deeper into this inmost will. And then to carry this forward into our day-to-day life and action. Thank you. Om Tat Savitur Varam Rupam Jyotihi Parasya Dhimahi Yannaha Satyena Deepayet Yannaha Satyena Deepayet. Om Tat Savitur Varam Rupam Jyotihi Parasya Dhimahi Yannaha Satyena Deepayet Yannaha Satyena Deepayet. Om Tat Savitur Varam Rupam Jyotihi Parasya Dhimahi Yannaha Satyena Deepayet Yannaha Satyena Deepayet. Thank you.